Apart from the Nubians, the Asiatics, the Puntites, and every other person who was involved in ancient Egypt, the Libyans stood as a unique threat in ancient Egypt. The first threat were the warriors, who could take your life with no consideration. But the second were the nomads, who would carry off Egyptians into the deserts and never return. No one knows exactly what they did with these Egyptians, but we do know that some of them made their way back. The strangest thing about the Libyans was that they were very aware of several different people. And so, if an Egyptian was stolen, he could end up anywhere from Europe, deep Africa, or even Asia. How is it that these people, who seemingly knew about lands far away, were able to hide themselves from anybody and everybody? Why is their history so separate from everybody else? Why are they in secret? Even in the olden days, they're mentioned as the veiled, both males and females, who would cover their faces as they approach people. And even in the future, we find that they are called the veiled Sanhaja, far away. Herodotus even writes that they were seeking out veils that were purple back in his day. But somehow in 800 BC, these people became tame. They became another faction for the Egyptians to use in battle. As we read, to the infantry and the chariot of another city, hasten, then ye shall abide until his chariot comes, that ye may fight as he says. But if his allies be in another city, then let one hasten them. These princes, whom he has brought for his support, Libyans, and favorite soldiers force battles upon them first. Say, we know not what he cries in mustering troops. Yoke the war of horses, the best of thy stable. Draw up the line of battle. Thou knowest that Amun is God, who has sent us. Now it is true that in later years the Libyans started believing in the same gods that the ancient Egyptians did. But even the ancient Egyptians mentioned gods unique to the Libyans. These Libyans are the closest neighbors of the Egyptians from the west. But these Libyans do not represent all the Libyans that the ancient Egyptians would encounter. For the Libyans who go as far as Morocco were another threat. Altogether, mountaineers who ran down, probably represented by the troglodytes. Like the Nubians, the Libyans made it into the religion of the ancient Egyptians. For example, there is a place called Baku, which was thought to be where the sun sets. Now, of course, taking this into realistic words, they probably were talking about the far parts of Africa in the north where there are mountains. But this area of Baku, because they changed the name to Manu, became east, where the sun rises. Now, obviously, the ancient Egyptians were not aware of Japan, so they were not referring to as far as Japan, but they were referring to as far as the east can go. Now, remember that this word originally meant west, where the sun sets. What is it about this that they were talking about? Well, in mythology, this land in the west was also known as the land where the gods go, but no man can. As we read from one of their religious texts, how happy is he who depends upon thee, O God Amun, bull of his mother, ruler of Thebes. Grant thou that I may arrive in safety, landing in peace, and resting in Tazaser like the gods. May I mingle with the excellent souls of Manu who see thy radiance at early morning. Hear my petition, O my Father, my Lord. I am alone among the gods who are at thy side. Crown my son as king upon the throne of Atum. Establish him as a mighty bull of the two shores, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, lord of the two lands, Usamare, Setamnammun, son of Ra, lord of the diadems, Ramses, Hekma Meriamun, emanation that came forth from the limbs. Thou art the one who didst designate him to be king, while he was a youth. Appoint thou him to be ruler of the two lands over the people. Give to him a region of millions of years, his every limb being whole in prosperity and health. Place thy crown upon his head, seated on thy throne, and may thy serpent goddess alight upon his brows. Make him divine more than any king and any great like thy reverence. As Lord of the Nine Bows, make his body to flourish and be youthful daily, while thou art a shield behind him. For every day put his sword and his warmest over the heads of the Bedouin. May they fall down in fear of him like Baal. Extend for him the boundaries as far as he desires. May the lands and countries fear in terror of him. Grant for him that Egypt may rejoice. Now, there's a lot to break down there. But first, let's start with this. When I say Libya, I don't mean east of Egypt, I mean west of Egypt. And clearly, to the west of Egypt, it was a huge mystery for them as we read. So let's break this down because there's some names here that are very important. How happy is he who depends upon thee, O God Amun, bull of his mother, ruler of Thebes. Thebes, of course, being Egypt. Grant thou that I may arrive in safety, landing in peace, and resting in Tazoser. Now, what is Tazoser or Tajoser? Tajoser is the land where people go after they've passed away. It's not necessarily the underworld, but it is the world of the dead. It is associated with spirits and different places like that. And of course, because there is a connection to Manu, as we will read, and the fact that Manu was placed in a specific location, it then gives a earth-like tone to it, because the people of Egypt didn't necessarily believe in other worlds beyond the one that we live in, but that the other worlds are located somewhere that you could arrive if you had the ability to. As it says, may I mingle with the excellent souls of Manu. Manu, of course, was located where Baku was, in the furthest place of Libya where the sun sets. So Ra goes there every day when he sets. It is perhaps not surprising that this mysterious location with Libyans was associated with death, especially since some of the kidnapped ancient Egyptians would just disappear and never return. It's one of the reasons why they got Nubians to set up fortresses in those areas so that they could block out the Libyans, who were true enemies of ancient Egypt. In this religious text, it's further implied by mentioning both shores, as we read, hear my petition, O my Father, my Lord. I am alone among the gods who are at thy side. Crown my son as king upon the throne of Atum, establish him as the mighty bull lord of the two shores representing the Baku and the Manu, king of Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, those are the two other directions, which is something that's very important here, that the Libyans have never been considered part of Egypt, but the Nubians were considered part of Egypt, representing Upper Egypt and even the western deserts. Lord of the two lands, Userman, Usamare, Setemnamon, son of Ra, lord of the diadems, Ramses, Hekma, Miriamon, emanation that come forth from thy limbs. Emphasis is further made on foreign cities in the next part where he says, place thy crown upon his head, seated on thy throne, and may the separate serpent goddess alight upon his brows. Make him divine more than any king, and great like thy reverence, as Lord of the nine bows. Now the nine bows are all the enemies of Egypt, and at times the friends of Egypt, representing just foreigners. Make his body to flourish and be youthful daily, while thou art a shield behind him for every day. Speaking about going around as the sun does, put his sword and his war mace over the heads of the Bedouin. The Bedouin, of course, being the people living to the east. Remember, I mentioned that they did use names to refer to people living in Arabia specifically. This isn't just Asia, this is Arabia. And you can see here they're talking about Maku. In here, they call it Manu already. So Baku is already changed to mean the Bedouin areas. May they fall down in fear of him like Baal, because of the praise of Baal in those regions. Extend for him the boundaries as far as he desires. May the land and countries fear in terror of him. Grant for him that Egypt may rejoice. As you can see, Libya is no place to play with, at least not for the ancient Egyptians. They did not have a small place in their hearts where they just looked at them like they were some other civilization like any other, but instead they looked at them probably as close equals. They didn't even use a lot of the epithets that they would use against all the other groups. Now, how can we tell that the Libya that is being mentioned here is not the Libya that the Egyptians consider to be part of their territory? Because parts of Libya, just like parts of Nubia, at times were part of their territory. Well, it's very simple. Remember that wavy symbol that I showed you? The one just under the eye in this picture? That is the Heka symbol that resembles the foreigners. That foreigner symbol shows us that they're talking about a place which they think is on actual land. But at the same time, this place is also mythologized. But here's a question for you. What do you do when the people associated with the underworld, a real people, come knocking down your door? What do you do when they overwhelm your armies? What do you do when they take over your lands? It seems like their fear, which they used in their religion, had become true. As we read, Shoshenq I was the son of Nimlit A and Tentespa A. His paternal grandparents were the chief of Ma Shoshenq A and his wife Mait Enwekshekt A. Prior to his reign, Shoshenq I had been the commander-in-chief of the Egyptian army and chief advisor to his predecessor Susinus II, as well as the father-in-law of Susinus' daughter Matkare. He also held his father's title of the Great Chief of Ma, or Mashwesh, which is an Egyptian word for ancient Libyans. His ancestors had settled in during the late New Period, probably at Heracleopolis Magna, though Manetho claims Shoshank himself came from Bubastis, a claim for which no supporting physical evidence has yet been discovered. Significantly, his uncle, Osokrin the Elder, had already served on the throne for at least 6 years in the preceding 21st dynasty. Hence, Shoshank One's rise to power was not wholly unexpected as king. Shoshank chose his eldest son, Osokrin I, as his successor and consolidated his authority over Egypt through marriage alliances and appointments. He assigned his second son, Eaput A, the prominent position of High Priest of Amun at Thebes, as well as the title of Governor of Upper Egypt and commander of the army to consolidate his authority over the Thebians. Finally, Shoshenq I designated as his third son Nimlet B as the leader of the army at Heracleopolis in Middle Egypt. Now, already they have told you this, but the name Shoshenq is not necessarily an Egyptian word. These are Libyans who took over the ancient Egyptian lands. This is scary for the Egyptians because, of course, they thought that this could never happen, as these people, as we read in the other one, the Lord of the Nine Bows, are thought to be held down by the ancient Egyptians, put to the side under the boot of the Pharaoh, or under the flip flop of the Pharaoh. Shoshenq, who came from a Libyan line, had now become the pharaoh, and he had become the owners, and he had the right to call everybody else foreigners. As you can see, he had arrested everybody else. Due to the redemption that he brings to the Libyans, we could call this the Shawshank Redemption. Even though he and his people were of Libyan descent, he came from a long, long line of Libyans, tribal leaders, and also religious leaders from Libya. Even though we can say 100% that he is from that line, he somehow, like almost every other person who took over Egypt, saw himself as an Egyptian first. Isn't that strange? Almost everybody who takes over Egypt does that. Now, these Libyans, who came with their own religion, came with everything else, as I have pointed out in the bottom, and even though he came from a line of people who were religious outside, tribal leaders from Libya, he abandoned all that to be Egyptian. Again, strange. But when his people were defeated and pushed out, they took the ancient Egyptian history with them. Two dynasties before this, Ramses III had already had a problem with the Libyans, who plundered the city over and over again. And like I said, some people were taken and never seen again. So during the 22nd and the 23rd dynasty, even though the Libyans would have taken over before that, in the 20th dynasty, the Pharaoh Ramses III was pushing them back, bragging about how easy it was. Behold, I will inform you of other things done in Egypt since my reign. The Libyans and the Mashwesh were dwelling in Egypt, having plundered the cities of the western shore from Memphis to Kerben. They had reached the great river on both its banks. They it was who plundered the cities of Egwoe during very many years, while they were in Egypt. Behold, I destroyed them, slain at one time. I laid low the Mashwesh, the Libyans, the Espet, the Kakesh, the Shai, the Hes, and the Bekin. They were overthrown in their blood and made heaps. I turned them back from trampling the border of Egypt. I carried away those whom my sword spared, as numerous captives pinioned like birds before my horses, their wives and their children by the 10,000s, their cattle in number like 100,000. I settled their leaders in strongholds in my name. I gave to them captains of archers and chiefs, men of the tribes, branded and made into slaves, impressed with my name. Their wives, their children were made likewise. I led their cattle into the house of Amun. They were made for him into herds forever. But unfortunately for the Pharaoh, forever did not last forever. In fact, it lasted only a couple 100 years, because after that, the Libyans were free to shimmy in the face of the ancient Egyptians. These slaves were free, the lowest became the high, and the movement of the Libyans had now dominated Egypt. For thousands of years they were held back. Now they were free. Now they could stomp out the ancient Egyptians. But like I said, they just became the ancient Egyptians. Next time we will look back, way back, at when the relationship between the Libyans and the ancient Egyptians started. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, and everything else. Thank you.